It started as a regular Friday evening. I'd spent the day running errands and catching up with old friends over coffee. And by the time I got home, the sky had already turned the color of burnt copper, clouds stretching thin across the horizon. I had been craving the solitude of the forest for weeks, the way it muffled the outside world, how the trees seemed to absorb your worries and leave you hollow, empty, but somehow at peace. So I packed a small backpack with the essentials, a flashlight, a pocket knife, a half-empty bottle of water, and a thin blanket, and drove to the trailhead I'd visited many times before. The car ride was quiet except for the hum of the tires over the asphalt. I had no one with me, and for once I welcomed the silence. Parking near the trail, I took a deep breath and stepped out. The forest greeted me like an old acquaintance. Pine needles crunched beneath my boots as I followed the narrow dirt path that snaked deeper into the trees. The air smelled damp and earthy, tinged with the sharp scent of pine resin. I remember thinking how perfect it all was, how serene, as if the world had paused just for me. At first, everything was ordinary. Birds chirped somewhere above, a squirrel scurried up a tree, and the wind rustled the leaves gently. I walked faster, enjoying the rhythm of my steps, the way the shadows shifted with the fading light. But the further I went, the quieter it became. Not just quiet in the ordinary sense, but an almost oppressive silence, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Even the birds seemed to vanish. My footsteps felt unnaturally loud. Every crack of a twig underfoot startled me, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder, even though I knew there was no one there. By the time the sun dipped completely below the horizon, the path had become harder to see. My flashlight cut a thin beam through the darkness, illuminating only a few feet ahead. I paused, listening. There was a faint scratching noise coming from somewhere off to my right, behind the thick trunks of the trees. My heart thumped loudly, and I told myself it was probably an animal, maybe a raccoon or a fox. But the sound persisted, deliberate, almost like claws scraping against bark, not the natural rustle of an animal. I shook my head and laughed at my own nerves. "It's fine. I'm fine," I muttered. But the voice didn't reassure me. It echoed weirdly in the still air, too loud, too hollow. I took another step, then froze. The scratching stopped. Silence again. My flashlight beam caught a movement just at the edge of the trees, then nothing. I blinked and it was gone. I decided to turn back. The thought of being out here after dark, alone with something unknown lurking, didn't sit well. But when I tried to retrace my steps, the trail seemed different. The path I thought I knew twisted in ways it hadn't before. Branches snagging my jacket, roots jutting out at strange angles. I stumbled over them, my pulse quickening. The forest had shifted, or maybe I had. Panic settled in. I called out, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello? Is anyone there?" No response. Just the wind through the trees, or so I told myself. But then I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping, like fingertips rapping against hollow wood. It started far away, somewhere deep in the darkness, then slowly drew closer. My stomach dropped, and I realized I had no idea which direction led out. Every tree looked the same, every shadow a potential threat. I swung the flashlight around, the beam trembling with my hand. And then I saw it. A figure. It was standing between two trees, impossibly still, almost blending into the shadows. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, the way my eyes were straining to see, but it moved ever so slightly, tilting its head as if observing me. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And then it was gone, vanished into the blackness without a sound, leaving only the oppressive silence behind. I ran. Or at least I tried. Every step seemed to echo endlessly, my own frantic movements betraying me to the forest. Branches whipped against my face, thorns snagged my sleeves, and roots threatened to trip me. But no matter how fast I went, the feeling of being watched never left. And the tapping followed, soft, rhythmic, impossibly close, then retreating, then closer again. I didn't dare look back. Eventually, I stumbled into a small clearing, the moon barely peeking through the dense canopy. And then I saw it again, more clearly this time. A shadow, humanoid but wrong, stretched impossibly tall, limbs too long and thin, fingers reaching toward me like branches. Its face, or what I assumed was a face, was featureless, smooth, reflecting no light. It moved with a strange fluidity, silent, deliberate, closing the distance without a sound. I fell backward, scrambling for my flashlight, trying to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadow stopped a few feet from me, and for the first time I noticed the smell, rotten, metallic like decayed iron. My stomach turned, bile rising. And then I felt it, not a touch, but a presence pressing against my mind, filling it with images I don't want to remember. Shadows shifting, trees bending in impossible ways, whispers that weren't words but still understood. My knees buckled and I collapsed. I don't know how long I lay there. Time lost meaning. When I finally dared to move, the figure was gone. But the feeling remained, crawling along my spine, whispering that it had not left, that it had only moved on to play with me another way. I tried to stand, tried to run, but the forest seemed to stretch endlessly. The trail I had followed gone, replaced by gnarled roots and dense underbrush. Every direction looked identical, every shadow a potential hiding place for whatever had been watching me. I wandered for hours, though it could have been minutes or days. The forest refused to let me leave, twisting around me, folding in on itself. I found strange markings on the trees, scratches that didn't match any animal, symbols that seemed deliberate but incomprehensible. And then I heard it again, the scratching, the tapping, now accompanied by a low guttural hum that vibrated in my chest. I fell to my knees, shivering uncontrollably, realizing I had no idea if this was real or if my mind was fracturing in the dark. At some point I stumbled into a creek, the water icy and sharp against my hands. I drank greedily, trying to quell the panic, and when I lifted my head I thought I saw a cabin, a faint light flickering between the trees. Relief surged through me. I ran toward it, praying it was real, but as I approached, the light died. The cabin wasn't there. Only trees, silent, unyielding, stretching endlessly. I screamed, the sound swallowed immediately by the dense forest. Eventually, exhaustion overcame me. I collapsed against a tree, tears mixing with sweat and dirt. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. A whisper, soft, almost intimate, came from just behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. My heart stopped. Slowly, I turned my head. Nothing. Only darkness, thick and suffocating. I told myself it was my imagination, but my gut said otherwise. I don't remember how I got out of the forest. I woke up in my car the next morning, headlights on, engine running, parked exactly where I had left it. My backpack was beside me, untouched. The sun was rising, painting the sky with soft pastels. I convinced myself it had been a hallucination, maybe sleep deprivation, maybe stress. But I know what I felt. I know what I saw, and every time I close my eyes at night I hear the scratching, the tapping, the whisper just behind the edge of the trees. I haven't gone back. I never will. But sometimes when I walk past a darkened forest or see shadows that seem to move on their own, I feel that presence again, watching, waiting, and I can't help but wonder if it's still out there, waiting for me to return. It started with a sound, a soft, insistent tapping like someone drumming their fingers against a table. I was lying on my couch scrolling through my phone, and at first I ignored it. My apartment had always been slightly creaky. Pipes, floorboards, the occasional groan from the walls settling. I had lived here for almost a year, and the old building, built in the 1920s, had a lot of character. Most of it charming, some of it annoying, but nothing that ever made me feel truly unsafe. The tapping didn't stop. It grew more deliberate, measured. I realized it was coming from above my apartment, the unit on the third floor. I lived on the second. At first I assumed it was the usual stomping or moving furniture, the landlord's tenants being careless. But then it paused and I heard something else. A faint whisper, too soft to understand, but definitely a human voice. My skin prickled. I pressed my ear to the ceiling. Nothing, just the faint hum of the heating system. Shaking my head, I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. The whisper came again, clearer this time, almost like it was right above me. The words didn't make sense, just a low murmur, fragments of syllables I couldn't identify. My stomach turned cold. I live alone and normally I enjoy that, but tonight the quiet was unbearable. I checked the locks on my doors and windows, double-checked the stove and lights. Everything was secure. I told myself I was overreacting. Tenants above, old building noises, my imagination. Still, every time I sat back on the couch I felt eyes on me, as if someone or something was observing from just above the ceiling. It escalated that night. The tapping became rhythmic, almost musical. Sometimes it would mimic my movements. I would set my glass down and 3 taps would echo above me immediately. I tried calling the landlord, but he didn't answer. Texting him was equally futile. I felt trapped. The whispers grew louder too, now accompanied by faint dragging sounds like furniture being moved slowly across the floor. I couldn't shake the sensation that someone, or something, was pacing directly above me, timing each step with my heartbeat. By midnight, I could no longer ignore it. I grabbed a flashlight and the pocket knife I kept in the kitchen drawer for emergencies. Slowly, I climbed the stairs to the third floor, trying to be quiet. The hallway was dimly lit, the old bulbs flickering. I reached the door of the apartment above mine. It looked normal as far as a door could, but the air around it felt heavy, like the space itself was pressing in. I knocked. Nothing. I called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the empty corridor. The dragging noises stopped abruptly, replaced by complete silence. I waited, and then I heard it, a soft, deliberate chuckle. A sound so wrong it made my stomach drop. The chuckle didn't come from inside the apartment. It came from the ceiling, directly below me, vibrating through the floorboards. I stumbled back to my own apartment, heart hammering, but the sounds didn't stop. In fact, they seemed worse now. Scratches across the ceiling, rhythmic drumming, whispers forming words I couldn't understand but somehow felt like threats. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the living room, flashlight pointed upward, waiting, listening. Every noise made me flinch. Every shadow on the ceiling looked like a hand reaching down. Days passed. I tried leaving the apartment, thinking maybe I was imagining it all. But every time I returned, the presence was waiting. The tapping, the whispering, the dragging. I spoke to neighbors. Some said they'd never heard anything. One elderly woman mentioned that the apartment above had been empty for years, ever since a tenant had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. That night, police found the apartment empty. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle. Nothing but an overturned chair and a single footprint smeared in what looked like dried blood. They never found the tenant. I laughed nervously when she told me, trying to rationalize it. Of course, it was probably a prank, or maybe my imagination, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I could feel the presence above me. It was patient, calculating. It didn't need to reveal itself fully. The sound, the subtle movements, the whispers were enough to unnerve me. One night, the tapping stopped completely. I felt relief, followed immediately by dread. Absolute silence in a place that had been screaming with sounds is worse than any noise. And then I heard it, my name. Soft, drawn out, impossible to trace. "Art," it called. Not a whisper this time, but a clear voice. Deliberate, echoing through the ceiling beams. My apartment felt smaller, suffocating as if the air itself had thickened. I froze, my knife clutched in my trembling hand. I wanted to leave, to run, but every exit seemed blocked. Shadows in the hallway shifted, stretching unnaturally. The apartment above pulsed with movement, almost alive, as if it was breathing. I felt myself being watched from every angle. My phone rang suddenly, though I had left it on silent. I jumped, the flashlight slipping from my hands. The screen showed an unknown number and a single message appeared. "Don't leave yet." I don't remember how I slept that night, if I slept at all. The next morning, I called the police, desperate for answers. They came, checked the apartment above. Locked, empty, no signs of life. They left with polite assurances, telling me it was probably a prank or some structural noise. But I knew better. The building itself was alive somehow, watching, waiting. The sounds continued in the weeks that followed. I stopped calling them noises. I started calling them the apartment. The presence seemed to follow me, extending beyond the walls, lingering in every corner of my living space. Sometimes I would hear soft footsteps behind me, or the subtle creak of the ceiling floorboards when I was alone. Mirrors reflected shapes that weren't there, and always the whispers. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Anticipation, amusement, hunger. One evening, I tried a different tactic. I sat in the apartment above mine. If I could somehow enter it, maybe I could confront whatever was there. I waited until the building was silent, and then I forced the door. It opened easily, as if inviting me. Inside, the apartment was dark, empty, but for a single chair in the center of the living room. I approached it cautiously. On the chair, carved into the wood, was my name. My blood ran cold. I turned to leave, and then the floorboards groaned. From somewhere in the darkness, a figure emerged, tall, thin, featureless, just like I had imagined before. It moved silently, yet I could feel its weight pressing down, a presence too large to comprehend. The whispers returned, now a chorus echoing my every thought. Panic overtook me. I ran, tripping over furniture that seemed to shift underfoot, as if the apartment itself resisted me leaving. I stumbled back into my own apartment, heart racing, lungs burning. I locked the door, taped sheets over the windows. For weeks I didn't leave. I didn't sleep well. Every sound above me made me flinch. I became hyper-aware of every creak, every draft, every shadow. I began to wonder if the apartment was sentient, if it had claimed me in some way. And the whispers, they never stopped. I don't know how long it's been. Days, weeks. Time feels fractured here. I've thought about moving, but the thought terrifies me. What if it follows me? What if leaving triggers something worse? I've considered leaving a light on all night, recording, trying to catch it. But deep down, I'm afraid to confront it again. The presence above is patient, waiting, smiling, I imagine. It knows I can hear it, and it enjoys the torment. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I hear soft scratching against the ceiling. I tell myself it's nothing. But then the whisper returns, low and deliberate, soon, and I realize I may never be free. Not from the apartment. Not from the presence. Not from the voice that knows my every movement, my every fear, my every thought. I don't answer the phone anymore. I don't open the door. I barely leave the apartment. And at night, when the wind shifts just right, and the shadows stretch across the walls, I hear it. The apartment. Alive. Watching, waiting, patient, and I know. Somehow it's always been there, always. I remember the first time I noticed the road. It wasn't on any map, and no one I asked had heard of it. It was late afternoon, and I was driving home from a weekend trip with friends. The sun low and golden, casting long shadows across the hills. I had taken a wrong turn somewhere in the outskirts of town, and that's when I saw it. A narrow dirt path branching off the main road, almost hidden by overgrown bushes and tangled trees. Something about it called to me. A quiet, insistent tug at the back of my mind, like the road was alive, waiting. Curiosity got the better of me. I parked at the fork and got out, brushing the dust off my jeans. The air smelled like wet leaves and decayed wood. I stepped onto the path, and it immediately swallowed the sounds of the highway behind me. No cars, no wind, no birds, just a suffocating heavy silence that pressed down on me. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it was just a shortcut. The path wound upward, narrower with every step. I passed trees that were oddly gnarled, roots twisting like veins, bark scratched and scarred as if by claws. I thought I heard something moving just out of the corner of my eye, shadows slipping between trunks, but every time I turned, nothing was there. My heartbeat quickened, and I told myself to calm down. I was alone, yes, but the forest wasn't dangerous. At least that's what I kept repeating. The sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched impossibly long. I realized I had no idea how far I had walked. The path didn't curve naturally. It twisted, doubled back on itself, then opened into small clearings that I hadn't noticed before. In one clearing, there was an old sign, weathered and broken. I squinted at the faded letters. Turn back. A chill ran down my spine. I laughed nervously, assuming someone had left it as a joke. But there was no one around. No sounds of human life. Just the road stretching ahead, darkening with every passing minute. I took a deep breath and continued, reasoning that the sun would last a little longer, that I would find the end soon. That's when I first heard the whispering. Soft, almost carried on the wind, but unmistakable. It wasn't words I could understand, just fragments. Syllables that seemed to twist and curl in my ears. I froze. The sound came from all around me, the shadows, the trees, the very air. I told myself it was my imagination, but the whispering grew louder, pressing against my skull, forcing my eyes to dart frantically around the forest. I started running, branches tearing at my shirt, roots threatening to trip me. The path that had seemed straightforward now twisted unnaturally. I ran in circles, each turn bringing me back to the same clearing with the warning sign. And the whispers didn't stop. They followed me, growing more insistent, almost angry. Panic overtook me. I shouted for help, but my voice was swallowed immediately by the heavy air. Then I saw them. Figures, thin and tall, moving between the trees. Not quite human. Limbs too long, faces blurred, shifting as if made of smoke. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root. My hand scraping the dirt. My flashlight dropping to the ground and rolling away. The figures paused, almost watching, their whispers melding into one low hum that vibrated in my chest. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering. I ran blindly, not caring where I went. The path seemed to stretch forever, trees closing in around me. I could feel their eyes on me, or at least I imagined I could. The air itself seemed to resist my movement, thickening, sticky, as if the forest had become alive and was intent on keeping me inside. Hours passed, though it could have been minutes. Time was meaningless in that place. I stumbled into another clearing, and this time I saw a cabin, small and ramshackle, almost hidden behind the trees. Relief surged through me. I ran to it, pounding on the door. No answer. I stepped inside. Dust coated every surface, and broken furniture lay in disarray. It looked abandoned for decades, yet the air smelled fresh, like someone had just been there. And then I saw it. A photograph propped on a table, yellowed and curling at the edges. A family, smiling, standing in front of a house. I recognized the house immediately. It was my own. My blood ran cold. I flipped the photo over. Scrawled in jagged handwriting were words I didn't want to read. "You shouldn't have come." I backed away, heart hammering. The whispering returned, louder now, almost mocking. Shadows stretched along the walls, shapes forming faces I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. I realized with a sickening clarity that the cabin was a trap, or worse. It was a warning I had ignored. I tried to run back to the path, but it had vanished. The clearing had shifted. Trees had grown where there had been none. The forest had changed around me, folding in on itself, isolating me completely. I stumbled, desperate, hands clawing at the trees. My flashlight flickered, casting brief, horrifying glimpses of the figures. They weren't following me. They were waiting, patient, like predators watching prey run blindly into a trap. I could hear the whispers forming words now. My name repeated over and over alongside phrases I couldn't comprehend. The forest itself seemed to breathe, exhaling cold, rancid air that made my lungs burn. And then I saw the road again, or what I thought was the road. A narrow strip of dirt stretching endlessly into darkness. I ran toward it, ignoring the branches that tore at my clothes, the roots that scratched my hands and knees. But every step I took, the path seemed to stretch further away. The more I ran, the longer it became. Exhaustion overtook me and I collapsed. That's when I saw them clearly. Figures emerging from the shadows, moving with unnatural fluidity, surrounding me in a circle. Their faces, when I looked close enough, were empty, featureless voids. Yet I felt them staring, pressing into my mind, filling it with images of every fear I had ever felt. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. The forest was alive now, and I was trapped inside its endless nightmare. I woke up hours later, if it had been hours, lying on the side of the road near my car. The forest was behind me, ordinary and silent. The sun was rising, painting the sky with pale orange light. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing to indicate the time I had lost. My backpack was missing, my flashlight gone. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. The whispers had not stopped. They lingered in the corners of my mind, pressing against my thoughts. I drove home without looking back. The forest behind me looked normal. Mundane, nothing like the nightmare I had experienced. I told friends, but they laughed, told me I was imagining things, that I must have gotten lost. I tried to convince myself of the same, but at night I hear it. Whispers in my own home, soft, insistent, echoing words I can't understand. Shadows move in the corners of my vision. I wake up sometimes, convinced I've seen figures standing at the end of the hall. I've tried to go back, to find the road again, to confront whatever waited there. But I never can. No matter how far I drive, no matter how I search, the path is gone. It doesn't exist on maps. It doesn't appear on GPS.